so I usually write my reviews as I play, and revise them by the end of the game, and revise again once I've sat with the game. For this game, I had to scrap everything after the halfway point. I'm going to say it a lot throughout the video, but this will be spoiler free. All the footage shown will be from the first half of the game, with any dialogue and objectives blurred out to ensure not to expose anything. It's focused on melee combat using the Unreal Engine, as was the Silent Hill 2 remake from last year, and its departure from the location it's literally named after, Silent Hill, and its long-distance vacation to Japan makes this the largest departure from the series ever. But that's the obvious. What may not be as clear is that it departs so much from Silent Hill in its lore that it's no longer a Silent Hill game. If you're expecting the game to explain itself and why it's so far departed from its source material, it doesn't. And I am of the belief that if it really wants to use the Silent Hill name and consider itself truly part of the universe, it needs to explain itself and earn it. And it doesn't. It may have fog, it may have monsters, and it may have the general concept, but it doesn't pertain to Silent Hill in any other way. It is Silent Hill in name only. I would go as far as to say it feels like it was a different project entirely, and it was later given the name Silent Hill in order to reintroduce excitement into the long-lost franchise after the famous PT demo spiked interest and was short-lived, giving Kojima's departure from Konami. Especially with the remake of 2 releasing last year and doing very well, it is a storm perfectly weathered to sell a new original Silent Hill. If you're looking for a genuine Silent Hill game, this ain't it, Chief. This is the same way I felt about Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio Future. Has the vibe, atmosphere, look, music, but it's not Jet Set Radio Future. It feels as though I'm pre-gaming to play Jet Set Radio Future. Silent Hill F feels like I'm playing a budgeted AAA experience inspired by Silent Hill that takes place in Japan, rather than actually playing a Silent Hill game. An inspired game that chose to focus more on combat than actually making a great story and experience that Silent Hill is known for, and that's its biggest problem. It doesn't matter how good the game may be, it's not Silent Hill. That being said, the game really isn't that good. Even when removing Silent Hill from the name, the game still doesn't scratch that itch that I was hoping it would. I played the game on story mode combat and hard puzzles. This is a poor naming convention, as the story combat is what is intended for the Silent Hill experience, and the hard puzzle is what's intended for the Silent Hill experience. I don't know why they wouldn't have made them match one another, or why they also wouldn't let you adjust these settings after the game has started. There's probably many people who expected the story combat option to be easy, then chose the Lost in the Fog option, which made the game really difficult and a pain in the ass. And then once you realize you may be out of your depth, there's no way to adjust it. So you either have to restart the whole game over to adjust the difficulty, or stick it through and possibly ruin the experience for yourself by playing a game more difficult than you wanted. We're going to begin with the biggest change of the big changes F offers, the combat system. While it does initially remain faithful to the core 4 with the pipe and by extension a few other weapon choices you can find throughout the game, the extended focus on combat needs to feel good and smooth in order to keep consistent and enjoyable for the entirety of the experience. And while the combat definitely can be clunky, it does a solid job at remaining consistent. The further into the game, though, the more and more enemies and enemy types that start to bombard you really hinder the experience. About halfway through the game, there is a drastic change in combat entirely. But this is also when the game really pushes the combat and when you really start to see the issues with its combat design. I'm not good at these kinds of combat games, I know this. This will be called the Dark Souls of Silent Hill, and that would be why I got my ass kicked at times. But while the combat, especially during boss fights, is generally fair, there are some really obnoxious sections that force you into combat. It will literally block off a combat arena and require you to kill every enemy in the area before you can continue. Where Silent Hill is usually about dodging and passing enemies when possible, this game does not follow that same core design principle at all. In fact, it's so far from that principle that it becomes the worst part of the game by far. Once you make it into the second half of the game, you're bombarded with more enemies than the combat system was intended for you to deal with, breaking any fun or challenge it had and forcing you into find cheap or unintuitive ways of fighting in order to keep afloat. Where instead of utilizing the combat mechanics, I was finding ways to cheese it in order to maximize my damage output while trying, keyword trying, not to get hit. You have to break this system, which is already pretty broken to begin with, in order to survive. Trust me when I say it is infuriating. I'll go into it some more in the next story section, but a massive issue I had with the game is how similar many of the enemies look to one another. Maybe as a creative decision, it's not a problem, but when each enemy has their own moveset and sometimes you need to make split-second decisions in combat, when the enemies aren't clearly defined, it's a really poor design decision. Music. It's alright. It's definitely not bad by any means, but in a series where the music is so standout and bold, I didn't ever really pay much attention to it here. There are some really creepy and eerie sound effects I did really like when in combat and around enemies. The sound design itself was solid, but honestly nothing to write home about. Next. So now, the story, the concepts, themes, the meaning. Again, I won't be breaking open everything and won't be spoiling anything, but I was very disappointed by the themes and how poorly it tries to explore these ideas and concepts. The monster designs aren't necessarily bad, but they're way too similar to one another, and some of them I don't know exactly what they're supposed to represent or how they fold into the ideology presented. Some of these are even carbon copies with a slight cosmetic change and similar combat moves, with only further muddles the waters of combat within the game. There's a particular enemy in the game that I still don't actually know how many variations there are. I just know that every time I saw it in game, I knew I was going to have a bad time. I got to a point where every time I knew there would be an extended combat section, instead of excitement or interest, I got more pissed and irritated that I had to engage with the gameplay instead of just journeying through the story. And when the gameplay of a video game is the problem, you failed the most important part. Maybe the worst offense to all of this is the focus goes from the atmosphere and the concepts to focusing more on the gameplay and mechanics. The monsters lose any sense of horror and the world any sense of immersion. Instead, you become overwhelmed with how much of a pain the gameplay and its mechanics become. I would argue even someone who falls in love with this game will find heavy qualms with the combat system. So, my hypothesis over the name. I believe that F stands for forte, which means loud in regards to written music. The symbol they use for the F looks very identical to the F in written music, and given the game itself, I think it's very fitting. This is definitely a very loud return to Silent Hill, especially since the last full release of Downpour in 2012. I also think this is supported by juxtaposing the silent in Silent Hill, so in an annoying way, it's saying the quiet part literally out loud. This is a large deviation from Silent Hill. Don't expect anything similar to the earlier games. So I'm going to give the game 2.5 stars. Mostly for its story. I think the game looks incredible. For the most part, it runs pretty well. There were some hiccups here and there, but it's really the story that I'm invested in Silent Hill for, and that was the most disappointing part for me. So all in all, it's fine. There will definitely be people who hate it way more than I did. There will definitely be people who probably consider it the greatest game of all time. But personally, I think it's kind of straight down the middle. But please tell me what you think about the game in the comments. Have you played it? Are you going to play it? What do you feel about it? Are you excited for whatever the future has to hold for Silent Hill? And of course, normal YouTube things, like, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to me rant about shit I love. And I'll see you in the next one.